We need to figure something out. It's all kind of converging. It's like a perfect storm. I always like to invest in things that other people weren't investing in. A lot of investors won't buy a stock unless somebody else owns it first. They need somebody else to kind of do the work for them. I think it became an electrifying type of moment when they saw the stock quadruple. That's kind of our goal. We want to be one of those few scaled Bitcoin treasury companies that can be that scarce paper that institutional fund managers can own. I was listening very closely to what Michael Saylor was saying. I like controversial stocks. He was controversial. I listened closely to what he was saying. He was very public about it. Talked a lot about these zombie companies, and it resonated with me. I thought he was talking to Semler Scientific when he was saying, you've got these companies out there nobody gives a crap about, there's thousands of them. And I said, God, that's us. Yeah, I think of him as the leader of like a Peloton racing group. Mm-hmm. He kind of braves the elements for us, he takes on the air pressure and then kind of opens it up for us. I think of him that way. Larry Fink's adoption, I think, more than anything, was probably pivotal, seminal moment for TradFi. The longer Bitcoin kind of sustains itself and becomes a safe harbor as that's happening, these companies might, see Bitcoin as the next frontier.
Chairman of Semler Scientific, Eric Semler, welcome.
Great to be here.
Thank you for taking the time to chat to us. It's always a fantastic privilege to get a guest to come into a studio. We're in Prague right now. We've got a dedicated room to record this, so it's at least we're making use of the budget.
Yeah, it's always better in person.
You've been in Prague before?
Yeah, love it. Got to be one of the greatest cities in the world.
So your background, you started as a journalist, mm-hmm. and you were talking about a period where you started investing in Eastern Europe. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. I always wanted to be a journalist my whole life. I just loved the idea of being a reporter, going out and getting a story and getting it in the newspaper and having a byline and making a difference in the world. I think a lot of stuff that I wrote really did impact things in a positive way. I worked for the New York Times. I actually worked for a Russian newspaper. And while I was doing that, I applied to law school and business school and got into Harvard and did a JD MBA at Harvard and ended up with a lot of student loans and wanted to go back to journalism after pursuing the JD MBA, but just couldn't pay off the debt with what they would have paid me at the New York Times. So I sold out, went into finance, learned the hard way, how to kind of model companies and value companies. And eventually I started my own fund called TCS Capital. Those are my wife's initials. I grew it to about $4 billion in assets under management. We were one of the largest technology and media funds at that time, dedicated strictly to technology and media. And I always liked to invest in things that other people weren't investing in. I was always interested in kind of the underfollowed or controversial stocks. And one of those was a company called Central European Media. CETV was the ticker. And they own TV stations in Eastern Europe. They own stations here in Prague, in Czech Republic. They owned in Slovakia, Slovenia, Romania, Ukraine. And I decided that before I invested in this company, I needed to go see all of those stations. So I did travel around Eastern Europe, Central Europe, visiting, getting to know the guys who ran the TV stations for Central European TV. I was blown away just by how well they were run, how profitable they were, what an incredible market position they had at that time, being kind of the main source of video information in those days. It was a long time ago, 2000s, early 2000s. That's when I started. But one of the things that I was always really proud of, the company had a conference call once, and the CEO said on the call, he said, if everyone would do what Eric Semler did in TCS Capital and come visit our stations, you would invest too. And we became the largest investor in the company, the institutional side. We were the largest institutional investor. And it made such a difference to go there, kind of like as a journalist / investor, to really see under the hood. But I don't think anybody else ever really did it. It took maybe a few years before people spent time doing that. And as a result, the stock went from, I don't remember exactly, like maybe I got in around $4 a share. It went to 100. over a short period of time. And it was just a phenomenal secular story of growth in media and growth in the Eastern European kind of economies. It was really the only way to invest in Eastern Europe at that time in the stock market.
Looking for a secure, trusted way to buy, sell, and hold Bitcoin? Gemini has been leading the way since 2014. Founded by the Winklevoss twins to be a security-first, fully regulated Bitcoin platform. With Gemini, your Bitcoin is protected with enterprise-grade security, backed by insurance and Type 2 certifications for SOC 1 and SOC 2. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or a long-time hodler, Gemini gives you the tools to stack sats and build generational wealth your way. From simple one-tap buys to advanced charts and trading features, it's all here. Buy, sell, and hold securely. That's Gemini. Gemini. Bitcoin with confidence. Need cash without selling your Bitcoin? With DeBiFi, you borrow against your Bitcoin, non-custodial, multi-sig escrow, and you keep your keys. No banks, no selling, just institutional grade liquidity with terms up to 2 years and APRs as low as 9%. All transactions are signed using private keys on your own device. Using a 3 of 4 multi-sig setup, 3 out of 4 keys must approve every transaction, giving you control, transparency, and peace of mind. Whether you're a hodler, miner, small business, or treasury team, DeBiFi gives you the cash you need now without giving up your Bitcoin upside or triggering a taxable event. Get liquidity, keep exposure, and stay secure. That's DeBiFi. DeBiFi, your Bitcoin, your money.
What do you think made people reluctant to come and explore boots on the ground, look around themselves, as investors, for example?
It's not easy. Like, think about, I think I went to 6 cities in 3 days. It's a lot of work. It's hard. It's investors tend to not find it worth it to kind of go, spend all that time on one stock that no one else cares about. It didn't have any research coverage. So you kind of needed to go to kind of figure out the numbers, right? There was no major research coverage on the company. There was no model out there. We had to actually come here and really build our own model. And I think that that's just, for a lot of people, not worth it. A lot of investors won't buy a stock unless somebody else owns it first, or or that it's covered by Wall Street research. Like, they need somebody else to kind of do the work for them. I was always somebody that needed to do my own work.
Does that come from your journalism background, or does it precede that as Eric Semler's disposition as someone who just wants to figure things out that other people have ignored? Like, are you a problem solver at heart? Because I feel like I am. That's who I am.
I am a problem solver. I'm super curious. I've been burned enough times by management teams and by not feeling like I had enough knowledge of what I was investing in, that I got to a point where I didn't want to buy a stock unless I really knew the management team or really had spent time on it. And that was that really, I felt, was an edge for me as an investor, is that I actually became kind of an expert on the company and the management team and built a relationship so that every time I'd go see them, I would just know the story better than everyone else, but also I knew them as people. I could tell if they were having a bad day or a good day. I could get a sense for how the business was doing just by their gesticulations. It became kind of that type of thing. Like, if you're covering the White House and you're a reporter and you get to know everybody around there, you can tell when things are going well or there's a crisis, right?
There is a temperature in the room with these things. Yeah.
And so I thought that was a very important kind of differentiating edge for me as a reporter and as an investor. I call myself a reporter, but I really did think of myself as a reporter.
There's also, I guess, a journey within Semler Scientific for you as well. Can you tell us about that? And I'll just leave it at that.
It's kind of a crazy story.
Yeah.
But I ran TCS for many years, and then eventually I made it what's called a family office, where I returned outside capital and just invested my own personal capital. And toward the end of that period where I was running capital for outside investors, I became more of an activist. I'd get involved, more deeply involved than just buying the stock. I'd actually write letters to the company, seek board seats, ask for changes. I became what's called an activist. I call it reluctivist because I hated doing it. I didn't want to, make waves. But when stocks underperform for so long and you've owned them, it's frustrating. And you start to feel like, God, I feel like I know what they need to do and they're not listening to me. So I had to kind of take it into my own hands and seek board seats, seek change. And I started doing that with several companies like Angie's List and GeekNet. And there were a few others. And I was having success with it. So I decided I should do the same thing with Semler Scientific. And that's an interesting story. My dad started the company. He's a cardiologist in Oregon. He came up with this incredible device called QuantaFlow to measure people for various chronic vascular diseases. And that was not my area. I'm not a healthcare investor. I was a technology investor. But my father needed help getting the company financed, and I provided the financing with some other investors and ended up owning a decent chunk of the company. And that was back in like 20 years ago. The company went public subsequently and was a rocket ship. In 2015 or 2014, it went public. Its stock went up 13,500% on this healthcare device my dad created. And was one of the best performing stocks like from 2015 to 2020. So what did I have to complain about? I'm happy. I'm not paying attention to it. I'm running my own portfolio of technology and media stocks. And then around in early 2020s, the company came under pressure. The stock fell precipitously because Elizabeth Warren, senator from Massachusetts, decided to kind of take on the Medicare Advantage space, which Semler Scientific was in. Its customers were these big Medicare Advantage insurers. And she started to push for restrictions on what they could reimburse for. And they changed the reimbursement rules. That affected our ability to get reimbursed by our customers' ability to get reimbursed for the procedures they did using our product, which affected us. And so the stock fell a lot. And we ended up in a situation like in 2022, 2023, where 40% of our market cap was in cash. And we were generating a lot of cash, but the stock wasn't going up, and it didn't seem like the market gave a crap about how much cash we had on our balance sheet. We were a zombie company. We were kind of the quintessential zombie company that Michael Saylor has kind of, pointed out should adopt Bitcoin Treasury. Michael Saylor's company had a similar profile. In August 2020, we looked a lot like MicroStrategy did. We had a lot of cash on our balance sheet. We were generating cash, and we needed something to grow. And we thought it would be an acquisition. Couldn't find anything that made any sense. And I was listening very closely to what Michael Saylor was saying. No one had followed in his footsteps.
Can I ask why?
Sure.
Why was what Michael's saying of interest to you running as a chairman of Semler Scientific? Why did that pique your interest?
Because I follow the stock market closely. I like controversial stocks. He was controversial. I listened closely to what he was saying. He was very public about it. Talked a lot about these zombie companies, and it resonated with me. I thought he was talking to Semler Scientific when he was saying, you've got these companies out there nobody gives a crap about, there's thousands of them. And I said, God, that's us. The other part of it was I like to invest in small mid-cap companies. Those are the typical zombies, the smaller mid-cap ones that you're seeing now adopt Bitcoin Treasury strategies. That was kind of an area that I was interested in. Just aside from Bitcoin, I was just like, wow, these stocks are so cheap. They got so much cash. There's got to be something here. We're kind of ripe for an activist, right? You look at this and you're like, they got to do something different from what they're doing. Maybe this is a situation where I should get involved, go on the board and try to affect change. So I was very aware of these, quote, mid-cap stocks he called zombies. I followed them very closely. I thought they were the most inefficiently valued stocks in the market. And so when he's talking about those stocks and there's this issue, and I have friends who run these companies who are in the same boat as me saying, the market doesn't care about our cash. We're so cheap. Our stock goes down every day. They barely trade any shares. We need to figure something out. And that's why it all kind of came together for me. I knew these stocks. I was chairman of one now. I went activist on this company 2 years ago to affect change. And I was listening to Michael Saylor. It was all kind of converging. It's like a perfect storm.
Did you reach out to him at some point?
I did. So about a year after going on the board in 2023 and exhausting every potential acquisition opportunity out there, it dawned on me that I was listening to one of his podcasts about zombie companies, and it dawned on me, I'm like, I got to reach out to Michael Saylor. So I first consulted my fellow board members who were not Bitcoiners and explained to them what Michael had done, not knowing full well the whole financial re-engineering story that he's doing, or engineering story, but just the success he's had putting Bitcoin on his balance sheet. I made them listen to some podcasts and read some stuff, and they were like, yeah, you should reach out to him. It makes sense. And so I did. I didn't know him. I knew him through my friend Tom Lee, and Tom Lee from Fundstrat introduced me to Michael. Michael instantly responded to my text.
I want to say this. Michael is so generous with his time. Like, he is on the beat all the time, podcasts, news, everything. He's very generous with his time.
Extremely generous.
Yeah.
Think about, he's been such a fan of all these companies adopting Bitcoin Treasury strategies. A lot of people would say, isn't that competition? He doesn't see it that way. He's thrilled that all of these companies are kind of answering his clarion call. And I applaud him for that. I think of Michael as, he's perfect for this whole movement because he's not an elitist. He's kind of he can relate to the average person. And
he'll go on the smallest podcast.
Exactly.
I'm like, what's Michael doing? I'd never heard of that.
Yeah.
How did he find them?
He's an altruist.
Yeah,
he's an altruist.
And he's open sourced his playbook. So usually when you've got some form of advantage or alpha, you keep it to yourself, don't you? And he's just socialized all of that. Here, this is what I'm doing. This is why. Yeah. This is how.
Yeah.
Go and do it
there
yourself.
were no secrets. He was hiding. He was so helpful. He was, offered his whole staff to help us figure it out. Like he couldn't have been, like, he just rolled out the red carpet for us. He was so excited for us to do this, and really, spent an inordinate amount of time with me to help me understand how to do it the best way.
How did you prepare your company, from the investors to the board and your staff, for this new strategy?
I tried to be as consensus driven as possible, not overlorded on them, not say, we got to do this. I need you guys to look at this, listen to Michael Saylor. I need you to look at what could happen here, understand there could be risks that our current shareholder base will be surprised, by this change in strategy. I didn't have anybody to help me execute this except for our CFO and her staff. So we were not really we weren't a big Bitcoin team when we pursued this, didn't realize how important that would be. And for the rest of the company, I think it became an electrifying type of moment when they saw the stock quadruple shortly after the announcement. I think for everyone, we were facing these headwinds from Elizabeth Warren's push against Medicare Advantage. To have something like this kind of bring the zombie, reawaken the zombie, right? And have the zombie come alive, I think was really powerful for our entire organization, our board, everyone. But you don't know what's going to happen. You make this announcement, you're not sure if the stock's going to be down 20% or up 50%. Like it was very uncertain and unpredictable, because you do have to have this turnover in your shareholder base inevitably.
How did you manage that process? So I know Michael went through a whole process of saying, this is what we're going to do in advance. We'll buy you out if you don't want to stay. And I think that was really quite a successful thing in helping that turnover and preparing the people who wanted to stay. Did you do something similar as well?
That was such a tough decision, and I applaud him for doing it that way. But I was worried about telegraphing it too much, and that I decided that we, as a board, we decided it was better to just make the announcement, and if people wanted to get out, they'd be able to. And it turned out really well, because our stock responded very positively to the news, and that I think our shareholders who had not done well as our healthcare business had declined, were able to get out at much higher price.
And did you find it? Do you know what the turnover in shareholders were? Were you able to share that?
Just, we see the filings of institutions on a quarterly basis. Definitely changed.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say it's hard for me to find anyone who's still there from the old days of the healthcare. Last time I checked, we had over 30,000 shareholders. I think when we started, we had several thousand, when we started this journey. So, So it's really changed, and it's a big retail investment.
I'm trying to pinpoint how long ago was your first purchase, and I have a sense that it was sometime more than a year ago. But
yes,
how long exactly has it been?
I think it was in late May of 2024.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
So it's been slightly over a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, what stood out to you about the journey? Because us Bitcoiners, we're an unruly mob, right?
Yes.
We're not.
Yeah.
An acquired taste. It takes a bit of getting used to the sort of volatility on the timeline and the reception that you're going to get from various parts.
Yeah.
But broadly and generally quite welcoming, I would assume.
Yes, very unbelievable support. People just, I was stunned by that. I didn't expect such an active kind of constant feedback. People getting so fired up when you buy Bitcoin and put it on your balance sheet. The reactions are exhilarating. I mean, it really is an electrifying experience, and it's great to get that feedback. Some of it you don't know how much is real, or if the person really owns your stock, or whatever. But it's great. It's a phenomenal, refreshing kind of alternative to the way a typical stock company in the public markets interacts with its shareholders. This is like constant, every day, constant feedback. It's all there on social media. You don't see that when you own NVIDIA or Google. It's so different.
I've never raised capital.
Yeah.
So what's the process like for you now as a Bitcoin Treasury company of raising capital? What sort of conversations are you having? What kind of investors are interested? What convinces them to write a check for you?
It's really interesting. There's obviously all these different things that Michael Saylor has kind of opened up. We've talked about convertibles and preferred and ATM and selling your own stock to buy Bitcoin. There's all of those things that are available at some point in time. The preferred market seems to be kind of where we're kind of focused in terms of an opportunity to raise capital in a highly accretive way, where we're not really issuing shares and diluting our shareholder base as much as we would if we were doing like a preferred offering. But it's a little bit, it takes time to kind of get into those spaces. Michael kind of opens them up and then we follow. We were actually the first.
Do you find like he's the big icebreaker tanker in the markets, and then it's much easier for you?
Yeah, I think of him as the leader of like a Peloton racing group. Mm-hmm. He kind of braves the elements for us, takes on the air pressure and then kind of opens it up for us. I think of him that way, and he's done that. The convert market, he's been a master at, and that allowed us, I think we've still like the only Bitcoin Treasury company to do kind of a traditional convertible offering where we raised $100 million earlier this year. But as there's all these treasury companies forming now, finally, I think that it's going to get interesting to, you have to be a little more creative about how you raise capital, I believe.
How so?
Well, I think that it's just not going to be like, it's not going to be as simple as just hitting your ATM or tapping the preferred markets. Those are really... You really need to do those when you're trading at a premium, and so it gets harder and harder to trade at a premium as there are more and more of these companies, right? Part of the magic of what Michael has been able to do and Metaplanet is really create a situation where their stock is trading at a premium to their Bitcoin holdings. We've been in that position too. Ours has narrowed a lot recently, and so it's made it put more pressure on us to figure out other ways to creatively kind of raise capital to buy Bitcoin.
What do you think is the deciding factor in what your mNAV is going to be?
It's a great question.
Because it's hard for me to tell.
I don't think there is one. I think it's different for every company. For Metaplanet, obviously, being in Japan, there's this tax arbitrage, but they've gone way beyond that. They created this massive brand. They are Bitcoin in Japan. I think that's a big factor for them. I think, and they have the highest mNAV, of a major Bitcoin treasury company. For MicroStrategy, I think a lot of it is tied to just the the wisdom of Michael Saylor, and he deserves a premium, just like Steve Jobs did, or Elon Musk, right? You know, what does Tesla's valuation about? It's not about electric cars. There's much more there, right? And there's kind of his brain.
There is a founder's aura to
Yes,
to both
to Michael.
companies. Sure.
But I think there are other factors. I mean, the volatility obviously is valuable, may justify a premium. I think one of the biggest, though, for us, the way I think about it, two things. One is the premium. There's just a scarcity of large Bitcoin treasury companies that large funds, mutual funds, can buy in the United States. You know, they can't buy Bitcoin, they can't buy ETFs. There's just going to be not that many. Even though it seems like there's so many companies announced, you need to be like in the $5-10 billion market cap to get on the radar screen of, you know, Fidelity or Capital or some of these companies that have so much capital to invest to buy your stock. And so that's kind of our goal. We want to be one of those few scaled Bitcoin treasury companies that can be that scarce paper that institutional fund managers can own. And I think we have a good shot at that. And we have good relationships with those people. So you ask kind of who's buying our stock now, or how are we raising capital? We have tremendous demand for our stock. Like I'm amazed by, I mean, I'm glad that it's happening, but even though our stock hasn't performed that well lately, we're still up a lot from when we announced our strategy. Right now, we've just been in a weaker period, and we're seeing a lot of demand. So, you know, raising
From what kind of investors?
mostly hedge funds.
Hedge funds.
Good hedge funds in the sense that they have a longer term. They're not trading it so much, but they have kind of this long-term view that we're undervalued. And I think that's interesting. I think there is this kind of potential with all of these things when you see kind of this rush to get to the Bitcoin standard. Over time, there's going to be consolidation. There's going to be a shakeout. There's going to be an opportunity for us to capitalize on our strategic value, I think. So I think they see that too. I think they say, wow, Semler's really undervalued. And they have this healthcare business that hasn't performed well. But I think it's going to be a great buffer for us next year and the year after if Bitcoin goes through some kind of drawdown. Doesn't feel like it's going to, but you know, inevitably it does. And so we'll have a really good kind of two-pronged narrative to our story. We'll have this Bitcoin treasury company that I think is going to do very well. But we'll also have a new product coming out that hopefully will be out next year to detect heart disease in its early stages. That could be a huge up market for us. So we're really excited about that. And it's taken too long between our last product and this one, but I think it has the potential to also create that kind of rocket ship experience we had early on with peripheral artery disease.
I'm presuming that investors, you know, like the liquidity available in Michael Saylor's stock. So if they want to get in and out of the position, it's, you know, that has some kind of favor as well. Do you think there's a tipping point where you will be bestowed a similar kind of preference as well? I mean, not in relation to MicroStrate's strategy, but in relation to where you are now. Do you think at some point you will get the benefit of that more so than you have now?
Very much. I think that's been a huge problem for us is liquidity in trading in our stock and volume. And that could, at the end of the day, be a big problem for a lot of Bitcoin treasury companies. It's kind of getting to that flywheel where your stock is trading, you know, so fluidly that you can benefit from the volatility of that, but also be able to use your ATM freely to raise capital to buy a lot of Bitcoin. We haven't been in that position until very recently. We were a very closely held company. Myself and some of the other board members, we owned over 30% of the shares. So it wasn't a very liquid stock comparatively to MicroStrategy or Metaplanet. And more recently, that's changed. We traded 1.5 million shares yesterday. You know, we've been trading much higher. I think that's going to create a lot of opportunity.
For context, how does that compare? Like, what's
So we were probably a few months ago just trading, 200,000 or 300,000 shares a day. It's really changed, and our options activity has increased a lot. And so, in some ways, we fixed half the problem. We got the liquidity to finally be where we need it to be. Now we just need it to go in an upside direction, and feel good about that. Some of the other things about the mNAV that I think are really important and that are kind of harder to quantify is just like building a connection with the Bitcoin community. I feel like we can do a better job of that. We brought Natalie Brunel onto our board. She has a fantastic network, and she's helped a ton already in just a few weeks. But I think we need to continue to do that, where we have people that really have a lot of credibility and trust with the Bitcoin community, know that we're going to be very serious about becoming a scaled Bitcoin Treasury company. And I'm hoping we'll be able to make some announcements soon about building the strength of our Bitcoin Treasury team.
Okay, I mean, Michael Saylor, towards the end of last year, announced a plan. At that time, seemed outrageously ambitious, right? We're all blown away by it. It's like, how's he going to do this? And then in the space of 4 months, maybe 4.5 months, completely blew that away, right? Blew that open. And now he's got a brand new plan.
Yeah.
And I wonder, do you have any plans to or announce a similar kind of plan, perhaps that kind of messaging and signaling to the investor market? Do you think that would enable an acceleration of your ambitions as well?
Yes, I can't talk about it specifically, but definitely that is something that is high on our priority list. And, that's part of how, we're growing our team, and we're preparing, to be able to get our hands around what is the right kind of guidance to give to the street on what we're going to do. But we're really fired up about that part of it. And I think having this liquidity unlock in our stock helps a lot, gives us more confidence that we'll be able to do what we need to do. So I love these situations. I've been an underdog my whole career. I always try to find those things that other people aren't looking at. And this is a great situation for me personally to kind of try to unlock value. Kind of feel like I'm an activist in my own stock again.
Yeah.
And so it's great. And we're pulling levers like the things you're talking about that I think will be really well received.
It's really interesting because in the Bitcoin space, these Bitcoin treasury companies, they seem to be more and more of them. But are you still like that crazy Bitcoin guy when you're approaching your investors? Because in the broader scheme of things, there aren't that many people who are convinced of Bitcoin in TradFi.
No.
I know that's increasing. I know we have Larry Fink, Paul Tudor Jones and the like.
Yeah.
But there aren't that many companies now where you can say the chairman is a fully fledged Bitcoiner.
And not those guys are all macro guys, so it makes sense that they would be more into it because they understand how serious the fiscal issues are in the world. More than the average stock picker like myself. I'm more coming at it more individual stocks. So in my world, no, the guys who pick stocks, they're not really. They're not seeing a lot of conversion there. There's a few guys, but not a lot. They still don't buy into it. They might buy, they might rent a Coinbase, buy Coinbase or MicroStrategy just, to make some money because the chart looks good or, there's some momentum there maybe. But they're trading it. They're not long-term, religious believers in Bitcoin. But I think that's going to change. I really do. I think that this institutionalization, Larry Fink's adoption, I think more than anything was probably pivotal, seminal moment for TradFi. Eventually, they'll see God, this is something we have to take much more seriously. So we'll see. What's really interesting is, I still spend a lot of time meeting with companies, just in the stock market. I had a casino company come into my office the other day. Senior guy there, 10 billion market cap type company, huge cash flow generation. It's only growing 1 or 2% a year, massive free cash flow. Then buying back billions of dollars of stock. Stock goes nowhere. I've barely made any money on the stock market.
Yeah.
And I love the guy. I've known him for 15 years. Hadn't seen him in a while. Just wanted to catch up on his company, see if there's anything interesting there. Great gauge of the consumer and how's the consumer like that. Casinos all over the country. And we get into it for about 10 minutes, and he says to me, "So tell me about your Bitcoin treasury strategy." I didn't even know he knew I had one.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? He goes, "I'm really interested in that. I don't know anything about Bitcoin, but what you're doing makes a lot of sense to me." I'm like, how do I learn? Where do I go? Can you send me something or, tell me what to do? He just sounded exhausted by this buyback and the lack of performance in his stock. and they're just oozing cash flow.
Basically where Michael Saylor was with his company 4.5 years ago.
Yeah, and this guy could buy billions of dollars of Bitcoin. And that's and it's not an unhealthy company. I mean, they are only growing 1 or 2%, but the market is really not interested in these stories. And that they're a bigger version of that. I've had that happen a few times recently, and it makes me realize that we are eventually going to get to kind of the mid-level of companies that are kind of slow growers, but, aren't really, don't have any kind of, existential risk. Zoom Communications is one that I think is an obvious target for this.
Why is that?
God, I mean, Zoom Communications, market cap's about 20 billion, 25 billion, in that range. They have 8 or 9 billion of cash on their balance sheet, almost half, I mean, more than a third. And they generate a few $1 billion of free cash flow a year. And they have a very good product that people like, but it's commoditized. There's so many options in that market, and they're not growing. I mean, they're flat. They're like 1 or 2% growth, similar to the casino company. And they're not getting any credit for their cash. Their stock is a very depressed multiple of earnings. And they've tried to buy things, to acquire things that will help them grow, but there's been no obvious candidate. They to me are the single best candidate for Bitcoin Treasury, and their CEO founder is a very visionary guy. He's been just a huge thought leader in technology. So I don't know him, but I would think he would believe in the merits of Bitcoin.
How do we conduct an intervention? I was just trying to look up the Ford Motor Company because I remember I don't know what possessed me to look up the Ford Motor Company, but I just knew it was an old, mature business, stale. It's got competitors with EVs from China, from Elon, and it's getting crushed. And I just know that, and I looked it up and holy, this is like 40 or 50% of its market cap in cash. Yeah. And the stock is plunging. It was, at least the last time I looked at it.
Yeah.
How do we stage an intervention with the Ford Motor Company? Because it's a very staid and stale company, and I imagine the board is very establishment.
Yes.
And they're going nowhere.
Yeah.
So how do we get through to a company like that?
I don't think you will for a long time, but I think if you go after companies that have closely held ownership, like Zoom does, where there's maybe even a second class of shares where they have voting control, and they are led by people that are actually visionaries or thought leaders. And the guy who started, the founder and CEO of Zoom, was obviously had a lot of vision and started creating Zoom and has had a lot of personal success. I think those are the people you go after. People that are probably own Bitcoin personally, and see the value of it, and trying to convince them that it makes sense for them to put it on their balance sheet. And I think that's all you have to really hope for, is put some on your balance sheet the way Tesla did, or Square, and they don't necessarily have to go all in, hog wild, Bitcoin Treasury strategy, issue debt to buy Bitcoin. They don't have to do that. But just like you gotta have some on there,
I think people are often critical of what Elon Musk did in the last cycle because he sold down some. Yeah. But in the broad scheme of things, we had this huge growing company, massive profile, and he held that Bitcoin not only on SpaceX's balance sheet, but on Tesla's balance sheet. And by his own words, he holds personally. At the moment, it's worth over $1.5 billion in each company's balance sheet of Bitcoin. Yeah. Now, that's an enormous sort of signal, right? And I know that people were upset with some of his antics, shall we say, and they didn't like the fact that he sold down, right? They don't like that. Yeah. But if we got the same level of commitment from Meta, Google, Amazon, I mean, just a few billion each, the signal of that to the rest of the market would be incredible. So I think, at least he's helped break the ice and keep that sort of window ajar as an opportunity for other companies.
Yeah, I think there's very little pressure on those types of companies because they're so fundamentally strong with their current business that they view it as too risky, I guess, their boards to take to start messing with the balance sheet that way. But I think someone's going to do it in that world because they're so technologically savvy and they understand Bitcoin. They clearly have to be owners personally of it. And at some point, one of them is going to break from the ranks and say, you know what, we got to own this on our balance sheet. There's just so much noise about deficits and bond vigilantes and U.S. debt coming from the very top, right? That one of these guys has to be, they're such smart people who are running those companies, they have to realize that it's the right move. And one of them is going to break ranks and do that.
I wonder, at one point they all wanted to start, or launch a phone. And I wonder if it's going to be something similar where once one of the big guys makes a serious commitment to Bitcoin, they all realize it's an opportunity and start pouring funds in there. But the thing that I can't really wrap my head around is what is yet stopping them, because the green light from the White House is there. The Larry Fink and BlackRock's embrace of Bitcoin obviously shows that there's an enormous demand for it through ETFs. Most successful ETF launch in history. Investor demand is undoubted. The economic environment, I think it's been well profiled, and all companies have an understanding of the inflationary pressures, the debasement propensity of the Federal Reserve. None of those things are going to change. If anything, perhaps accelerate. And so what is the key thing that they're missing? Are they so not distracted, because it's a core mission of those to be involved in AI and AR and all those other things. They're tech companies, they should be building tech. But from a financial point of view, from a balance sheet point of view, what do you think is stopping them at the moment?
I'd love to get inside their head and understand it. I think part of it might be custody, it's probably not, it's some aspect of it that the banks that are custodying Bitcoin aren't the banks they use for their cash and treasuries. I think also the AI commitment is a big factor. I think for most companies, they're spending everything they can on AI, and the numbers of CapEx for AI are insane. And so that's probably where their focus is. I think also it's not a business in the sense that it doesn't generate Bitcoin. It doesn't generate cash flow. It's not going to, really, from their standpoint, really, drive growth at the company. And they're all about trying to, meet numbers, beat numbers, kill it in AI. Like, their priorities are just not focused on their balance sheet. Their balance sheet's kind of an afterthought.
Well, that's a really interesting thing you say that, because when I look at, for example, Apple and Google, it seems like they've made huge efforts to get into the payment transaction side of businesses, which is really sort of like low margin. And one of their advantages is to, lower costs as well. And I'm like, why don't they see it as a similar opportunity to get into the financial side of, with Bitcoin? Essentially, I see what MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor, I should say, with strategies doing is like setting up this huge asset base that then can be used either as some form of insurance for services, financial services, or other kinds of financial products, right? Yeah. There's a huge number of services that are possible as a result of having that asset base. Yeah. I'm like, why aren't they looking at it from an innovation point of view to upend the traditional financial system? Because they're constantly talking about themselves. They have a self-image as disruptors, the tech sector, but so cautious when it comes to Bitcoin, which is clearly a technical innovation as much as a monetary economic innovation.
Yeah. I mean, part of it could simply be their shareholder base, right? Their shareholder base doesn't want them to do that necessarily, right? That's not why they're invested in Apple or Meta. They're invested in them for other reasons, or, that's a deviation a little bit, and a distraction, and they'll get there. I think they definitely will get there, but it will probably be at a much higher price where Bitcoin is trading.
I'd be happy to see them pay 500 to $1 million a Bitcoin. I guess the question I'd have is, what do you think would be their first foray into Bitcoin? Would it be simply a minor allocation as a debasement hedge? Or would it be some kind of foray into establishing a Bitcoin business?
Yeah, I think it would be, well, we've kind of seen that a little bit where, Square and PayPal and others are trying to kind of, and Robinhood and others are kind of, viewed by the market as plays on Bitcoin to some degree, which they're really not if you look at the fullness of the company. I think it's going to be kind of a non-impactful purchase of Bitcoin, in the sense that it probably isn't going to be a huge percentage of their treasury holdings, but it will be something significant. And it might come from an activist. It could come from someone who just believes that Bitcoin is the future and that they should be, getting ahead of that, and that the can is gotten too heavy to kick down the road, and they need to be more cognizant of that. And so you could have a flip. It kind of starts with the shareholders, right? To get, the shareholders have to kind of push that. So you could have that type of activism that Michael Saylor has tried a bit, right, with Microsoft, and we saw that with Meta and Strive. I think you'll probably see somebody pushing for that. They're going to have to go after the companies that underperform. So Google would be the kind of the first stop. You could have a very populist campaign to pressure Google to buy Bitcoin because they need something to outperform. They haven't had a good year, and this is something that would enable them to do that. It's very similar to like when Einhorn or Dan Loeb went after these big companies to buy back more stock. It's a very similar concept. Instead of buying back all the stock or paying a special dividend, buy Bitcoin. I think it's a more powerful story and idea. And I bet, maybe Ackman or one of these guys eventually decides that it's a great strategy for, building shareholder value, that these massive balance sheets that are bigger than most countries' balance sheets should be kind of leveraged and taken advantage of, or exploited.
Is it known whether Bill Ackman holds any Bitcoin?
I don't know.
Yeah, because I haven't seen.
No, I've never seen anything like that.
Okay. Yeah,
maybe I'll get to a point where I'll have to do that.
Definitely, it could be for you.
Yeah.
I wonder whether given what Facebook and Zuck have previously tried to do with Libra, whether they might actually prefer to try to launch a stablecoin business. I think it seems to be like that's kind of like JP Morgan, some of the banks, they're trying to coalesce around that kind of business model. They've seen what Tether has been able to achieve, and they might look at that as something closer to their existing business models.
Yeah.
Essentially payments and then the back-end treasury operations. I still see them like pushing Bitcoin at arm's length, and it's a curiosity to me.
It was really interesting yesterday. The Genius Act was approved, and we saw a pretty significant drop in MasterCard and Visa and in the stocks. And it's a reaction to what's happening with Coinbase and others who are kind of coming into their territory with stable coins. And it feels like, as someone who's been following the markets a long time, it feels inevitable that stable coins are going to be kind of, permeate all of these financial institutions, and that there's going to be this massive kind of race to be a stablecoin provider. And that probably does link to Bitcoin, right? It kind of gets you in that realm, and you start going to dinners with people that are in the stablecoin business, and then Bitcoin comes up a lot, and the longer Bitcoin kind of sustains itself and becomes a safe harbor as that's happening, these companies might, see Bitcoin as the next frontier.
Well, it's interesting because there was quite a bit of blowback or pushback on the number of mentions of stablecoins at the recent Bitcoin conference it was Vegas, wasn't it? And I'm like, okay, but if this is an area that helps push the political landscape in our favor, is that such a bad thing? I mean, it's a transaction mechanism, right?
Yeah.
It's not an investment medium.
No, I don't think it has the same.
Right?
No, I think it has great tailwinds. I think it's going to become. I think it's a very significant turning point. For crypto, for
the Genius Act in particular.
I do believe that. I think it's going to become. Just look at the way that Circle has appreciated since it's gone public. I think investors see a massive, TAM, a total addressable market for this area, and there's going to be a lot of big land grabs there for sure.
Well, it's interesting because Tether is still a private company, isn't it? And it's the biggest. Is it the 18th largest buyer of treasuries or something like that?
One of the largest,
amongst even nation states. So I wonder if there will be pressure on them to go public.
Yeah.
Because I remember when Facebook was growing phenomenally, and they started feeling the pressure that they had to go public because it was it was too big to be private, wasn't it?
I think we're going to see a lot of stablecoin public companies. Yeah,
Okay.
the way we are seeing Bitcoin trend.
You think that's a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the more that stablecoins become adopted, that's a good thing. I think it's an improvement, right, on the way money is transacted in the world. I think it's a very positive thing. So, yeah, I do.
Eric Semler, thank you so much for coming and talking to us. I really appreciate it. I've been wanting to reach out to you for a chat for a while, but I just wanted to wait for the right opportunity. And I looked at the speakers list, and Eric's coming to Prague, so I had to reach out. Thanks for coming down at such short notice, and I really appreciated the conversation.
Thank you, Archie. You're so easy and fun to talk to. I love all the subjects you bring up, and your curiosity about everything I've done. It's been really fun to talk to you. I'm going to learn more about you next time.
Well, I'm happy to have a coffee anytime. So
Okay.
if you come to London, look me up as well.
Okay, I would
Thanks,
love
Eric.
that. Okay, thank you.
Cheers.
Okay, great.